Welcome to Pegwarmers. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Chris from Muppet Stuff.
And we're here to talk about toys. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Chris has a blog and a YouTube channel and just the most amazing Muppet collection. Like, how many things do you think you have?
I've been doing a spreadsheet.
Oh, really? Okay.
I've been really trying to get it all cataloged and together, and it's got to be over 3,000 plus items.
Wow, that's awesome.
I know that before I even actually got the cataloging and the spreadsheet together, I did it kind of like, a head count. Went around the room, and I got a quarter way around the room. And again, it wasn't, super specific, but it was something around 1,600 items. Okay. And that's only a quarter way around the room, not including anything in the center.
Right.
So if you've seen any of my videos, there's a tour video out. You could see that it's not a small space. It's a fairly large space. And so I can only imagine if it's 1,600 to that point.
Right.
It's got to be at least 3,000 and maybe even, 4 plus. Who knows? And I have a lot of things still in storage, too.
Right. Almost anybody that collects has stuff that's not on display. Yeah, that's crazy.
That's the downside, right? It's like you want to have everything out. You want to show everybody everything, but you got to pick and choose like your own collection of what you want to highlight.
You got to curate it. You can't. You'll run out of space unless you are a very particular collector.
And when it comes to Muppets,
there's so much.
There's just so much, and that's one of the downsides of like. Mine's not just Muppets.
Yeah.
I collect like all of Henson.
Right.
So for a long time when I was just starting to collect, I said, okay, I will get one thing from a show to, exemplify or signify that production.
Gotcha.
But then it's like, there's this one, there's one thing, but if I get this other piece, it'll kind of complete the set, or this other, all of a sudden now
I get that.
And everyone, I'm sure everyone knows that's watching has that problem.
Yes.
You're like, oh, we know the struggle.
Well,
it's real.
I'll get the main character from Masters of the Universe or G.I. Joe or whatever, and then suddenly you have 15 characters from that show, and it's a whole separate collection,
Exactly. So, I collect Fraggle Rock and the Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, but Sesame Street is like the bane of my existence now.
I'm sure.
Because I dipped my toe in, and as soon as you dip your toe in, it just swallows you whole.
And you collect all errors, so you don't like... So, like, stuff that pops up in stores all the time, you're going after that stuff?
Well, I try not to get, like, new, modern stuff that you see all the time. I try to collect characters that are underrepresented. If I see more vintagey things, I'll definitely grab that stuff. But the problem with Sesame Street is the really early stuff is hard to find and expensive.
Right.
And then the late 70s to mid 80s stuff is still sought after, but a lot more easily accessible. But there is just so much of it. The cool thing, though, is when you find things from that late 70s, early 80s era that are weird, that are like got weird drawings, the characters are not really on model, because they didn't really care about that stuff until like the later in the 80s, early 90s especially. So there's like really interesting stuff. You're like, this is a legit product. They actually put this out.
Well, because even with the Muppet characters, it's so interesting how they evolve, like the puppet itself. So you see products that have an older version of Miss Piggy or whoever on it. And it's,
and you're like, oh, why did they draw it like that? Yeah. Because that's how she looked.
They looked at a different picture, a different model of the character, and then drew a funny picture of it.
Right. I mean, one of the cartoonists from Mad Magazine, Jack Davis.
All right.
It took me a second. I'm like, oh yeah, Jack Davis. He was actually a licensed artist for Sesame Street.
Okay.
In the in the beginning, in the late 60s, early 70s. So. In the 70s, 80s, when he was, at his heyday at Mad Magazine, you'd see these caricatures, but he drew them, and they were legit like 10 years before. So you actually have legit like calendars, a couple of things where you're like, that's a Jack Davis like caricature Big Bird, but it's on a real product.
Yeah, that's really wild. All right, so our first segment on the show is news, and we had a couple things that have recently. I mean, there's always kind of Henson and Muppet news.
I mean, that's my jam, right? That's what I do. On my blog is I collect news about the productions and news primarily about products, but to supplement that, it's all news about Henson and Henson related items as well. So there's always something.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were both really excited about is NECA is doing Jim Henson's dinosaur toys.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I have the entire set of the old toys.
Yeah.
All mint on the card.
Okay.
I also have them loose because as a kid.
Yeah.
That was I played with my toys as a kid.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I was like 10, 11 I started keeping things in the package. And I was just sort of around that era, and I was like, oh, should I open these? Should I not? And I'm like, I'm opening them.
I had a bunch of them. And I played with them too. I was, just at that kind of age where like mid-elementary school, where you're not playing with a lot of stuff, but they're funny and quirky to display and, fool around with a little bit. I actually remember getting the Happy Meal Baby because it was in scale with them better. So you could like kind of prop him on his shoulder and use a little squeeze button thing to make him actually hit Earl on the head.
That's what's so funny is that the action figures had very limited articulation.
Yes.
They just had like a waist, right? Yeah. So you just kind of turn them on their waist. Then they came out with the Happy Meal toys. I think they were from McDonald's or Subway.
Yeah, I don't remember where they're from, but meal toys.
But they were weird because they were like pump action figures. So they were small
hydraulic
figures. Yeah, you had this like button you press and air would shoot down the pipe and then make the character, like Robbie had a guitar and he would like jam out. Yeah. And like the baby, I think, had like a pot. And it was like, not the mama. And it's like, also I'm like, how the heck are these like cheapo Happy Meal figures better than the action figure?
Yeah. I remember thinking it was so bizarre that Robbie had his hands in his pocket but came with a basketball accessory that he couldn't interact with.
And a skateboard.
Yeah.
Well, who's skateboarding with their hands in their pockets? It's bizarre. So I'm hoping with these NECA ones that they'll be a little more
articulated, detailed.
Because the Funko came out with dinosaur figures recently as well, and again, they're not articulated. Right. Like, the head swivel, and that's about it. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the line and to see how expansive it can become.
I want the mother-in-law.
Ethel, man, you got to have Ethel.
She's so funny.
I guess like if she's never left the seat, so I'm assuming she would have to be attached somehow.
Yeah.
But like it would. I just thought of something crazy. It should be remote controlled. Because on the show, right, that's how she gets around. It's a wheelchair, and instead of just like, the action, the thing they had at the McDonald's toys, whatever, it just kind of swiveled back and forth, right? Just kind of rocked. You should be able to like...
That'd be pretty funny.
At least on wheels or like,
It's like a friction toy pulled back.
Oh, something like that. I'm sure as long as it has wheels and like an axle...
Yeah.
Some hobbyist, will modify it and make it a remote control, and it's going to like zip around and like start chasing the DeLoreans on the street or something. It's going to be a whole thing. So Decca, if you're watching, get on that. That's going to be cool.
I'm very excited to see what the line looks like. Like we've seen Baby and Earl so far, right? And so obviously those are the most popular ones. So those are the ones you have to start with. But I would assume they'll get the whole family in for sure. But then it comes down to, will they make other people? That the previous line that from in the 90s, they had the boss, but I think he was the only non-family member in it.
Yeah.
So
they had BP Richfield, who's the boss, but not the grandmother.
Right.
So that's why you really want the grandmother to complete the old set, right?
Right.
And the thing about Dinosaurs is that show was so sophisticated.
Yes.
Even the names, like most people don't realize that Sinclair, it's from the Sinclair Oil Company. Mm-hmm. BP is a oil company, and so is Richfield.
Right.
All these names were all oil and gas because they used fossil fuels, which came from dinosaurs, right? So like the whole thing is like super creative, and the way they were able to bring in other dinosaurs as like they had a generic dinosaur that they used over and over again as other characters in the show. They just like redressed them. So they'd be like,
which is a very Muppet thing to do.
Right. So they had this one guy and he'd be like, oh, there's that guy. Oh, he's not that guy anymore. Now he's this guy.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping let's army build.
That would be funny.
Let's get that guy. So that and different costumes.
Could you imagine that as like a Comic-Con set where he's got all these interchangeable accessories?
Right. You pull his head, take his head off, and now he's their co-worker. You take this out, and now he's the grocery store clerk. Now he's because they had two guys. They went like a blue guy with like a longer snout, and they had like an orange guy with like a tucked in snout.
Okay.
Like, put those two guys with a couple interchangeable. There's your Comic-Con exclusive.
That's a great.
And Monica, the neighbor.
Right.
I mean, they have these Jurassic Park toys, right? And they have all you see in the package is just a little piece of it, and then you build the rest. You could have her head because all you saw on that show was like her head and a little bit of her neck.
Right.
And then have the big body, and then you could have this gigantic Monica de vertebrae thing that could be like, she could be dating your T-Rex from Jurassic Park. I mean, there's a couple right there, and that Monica de vertebrae, the real one, is still at the Henson Company lot.
Wow.
And even crazier still, it's outside.
Really?
It's been outside for 30 years, sitting out there, and it's from the pictures I've seen recently, it still holds up. I mean, it might
crazy.
need a touch of a paint.
Yeah,
or
I'm
whatever,
sure.
But it's been outside.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy that they would do that, but that's how well they built the things. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Everything else is falling apart, but Monica the Vertebrae is outside and she's fine.
That's crazy.
Totally bizarre.
And then another recent news thing is the new Disney Plus show, right?
The Muppets Mayhem,
Muppets
starring
Mayhem.
my favorite characters, Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. That's my phone screensaver. I'm all about Dr. Teeth. When I was a kid,
Okay.
obviously when you're a kid, Kermit, maybe Big Bird or Grover, whatever. Kermit was definitely my favorite as a kid. And then everyone always asks, right?
Yeah,
if you're a
right.
collector, whatever it is, if you're
Yep.
whatever franchise you're into, everyone always asks who your favorite character from that is. And of course, with Muppets, everyone says like, "Oh, who's your favorite character?" And like everybody says Kermit. I'm like, I have to find a new favorite character.
I get it. Yeah.
I can't be this well known and this into this franchise and have the most basic possible answer ever. Like
Right.
this is
it's
ridiculous.
like being the biggest X-Men fan. And you're like Wolverine. Like, no kidding.
Right. It's like, well, that was a dumb question. Right. So I purposely set out to have another character. And so I say, when people ask me, I go, well, my favorite character is Green, is performed by Jim Henson, and is a Muppet. Not a Sesame Street Muppet, not a Fraggle Rock Muppet, a Muppet. And they go, it's Kermit. And I'm like, no, it's Dr. Teeth. Because it's a Green Muppet performed by Jim Henson. And people are like, what the? So that it's like a little trick I play on people. Like,
that's great.
Right. So it works. And it's legit. Like whenever Dr. Teeth comes on, he's not a character that is used that often. So it's special when he's there. It's not like he's in every scene.
Yeah, really, Animal is the only one in that band that gets kind of the crossover with the core group, you know?
And for I thought he was a little overused in Muppets Most Wanted. They actually made him like a little too much of a core character because he's not supposed to have a whole range of emotions.
Right.
I mean, Frank Oz designed Animal to be like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, basically. Like, there's like food, sex, and drums. Like, that's it. Like, there's not supposed to be a whole lot of character development with Animal. It's not supposed to be that way. You can do that with other characters. But I'm looking forward to this. I had an idea years ago for like a movie featuring the Electric Mayhem that was like the Electric Mayhem goes on a world tour. Yeah. Well, they kind of stole that idea with Muppets Most Wanted, and I was like, man, I can't do that now because so they came up with this new idea where it's the Electric Mayhem in the present. And they are, looking to get back into the music industry and put out their first album.
So it's kind of Blues Brothers, like getting the band back together.
Yeah, and I was like, that is really cool. That's a really cool idea, and it really opens itself up to music-related guest appearances.
Yeah,
and the thing that I thought the last few Muppet projects were missing was music.
Okay,
and it was so bizarre because like the 2011 movie, The Muppets.
Right.
Okay, this is where it gets real confusing because there's the franchise called The Muppets, right? Then there's the 2011 movie called The Muppets, and then there's the 2015 TV show called The Muppets. So
yeah, it's not great branding. No. Like it's too confusing.
And for a franchise that began as such a creative entity, for them to go to that well so many times. It's kind of ridiculous. Well, at least now that's over. They can't do anything else just called them. I guess they could because why not? Like they did a movie and a TV show called it. But the thing with The Muppets, the 2011 movie, was about literally there's a line in the movie that says, and they're cleaning the theater.
Right.
And, Kermit says, oh, this is boring. And Walter comes in and says, what are you doing? This is The Muppets. You do this to music. They don't play a Muppet song. They play, we built this city, which is bizarre. But, okay, you do it to music. Then, so they seem to learn this lesson, like, in their own movie. Then the 2015 movie, The Muppets, comes out, and there's, like, no music at all. And they're like, oh, let's retool this. By the end of that series, it didn't get picked up for a second season, but by the end of the season, they started doing more music stuff. So they seem to learn their lesson again. Then they come out with Muppets Now, which is just, like, it was supposed to be a bunch of shorts, like, that kind of got put together. And again, no music. Electric Mayhem's like not even like you just learned this lesson twice now and have still not learned this.
And it's like what the brand is built on. Like the Muppet Show was mostly singers and dancers as guests, so they could do musical numbers.
Right. So this, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a sitcom movie type deal where it's like, from what I've heard different reports where it's basically a 2-hour, 3-hour movie broken
Chopped up, yeah.
And then I've heard, that kind of thing. So I'm assuming at some point you're going to have musical interludes if the story is about a band.
Right. I would hope so.
You would think.
I would hope so.
So I'm hoping they learn a lesson. I mean, they got the Goldbergs.
Yeah.
They got
Adam F. Goldberg's working on it.
He's part of this, and he's a huge Muppet nut. He's actually we've been in contact in the past.
Okay.
I sent him an email, or he sent me an email, something in the early days of the show. I know what it was. I was giving him a hard time on my blog because the show would always have Muppets in the background, but they were like new.
Oh yeah.
So
a lot of it's a problem with a lot of shows like that. Like that '70s show would always use modern Star Wars. It's just so much easier than trying to track down. But it's annoying. It's very annoying.
So I'm like, this is BS.
Yeah.
So I would show pictures and I'm like, look at this cool stuff. It's unfortunate because this was made like 3 years ago, or this is from the whatever. It's obviously not from the '70s. And so he was like following the blog, and he wrote me. He's like, yeah, we're working on it. We're the next season. We have a better budget, and we've told our production team.
Gotcha.
Look at the tags or whatever. So they actually did that. And when I saw the show later, and I saw them change, I'm like, I think, thanks, Adam. I appreciate you.
I love it.
Keeping it authentic. So he's a good guy. He's a really good big fan of the Muppets. So I think this show is in good hands.
That's awesome. Well, that's exciting to hear.
So we'll see. Well, we've yet to hear anything of when it's. As of now, as of recording this, we don't know when it's going to premiere. But
I'm sure there's a ton of post production.
Yeah, they got
because there's always a lot of green screen and things like that.
Well, the thing that I've seen a lot of is they've been actually shooting on location for this show.
Okay.
I've heard a lot of location information. Like there was an incident where a truck almost went off a cliff by accident. Like there's a couple stories that were out there. And the picture they posted recently shows the characters out on the beach, and it's not a green screen.
Okay.
They're actually there. So that there's probably a lot of like green screened arm rods. They probably have to take out that kind of stuff. But they could probably show a sizzle reel any day.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Very cool.
I'm definitely looking forward to that.
All right, so our next segment is new to the collection. I'm going to go first because mine's not a Muppet thing, so yours will blend in better. But, I recently picked up from Masters of the Universe Masterverse Beastman. This is the New Eternia Beastman. So this line is sort of designed to incorporate every version of the characters into one line, so they can do the vintage figures, they can do modern versions, and then some of these guys, the New Eternia line is sort of an amalgamation of kind of the classic look as well as like details from their prototype designs. So they might have like belt buckle symbols that are from a concept sketch that didn't make it in.
I was a huge He-Man Master of the Universe fan in the 80s.
Okay.
And then I wasn't into the anime one that came out in like the 2000s.
Yeah.
New Adventures of He-Man. It was
right.
But I watched the new Netflix Revelations, I think it's called, that Kevin Smith made, and that was amazing.
It's well done.
It's really well done. And then of course they were actually super smart about that, and they put out toys for that line, but they also said, let's bring out this Origins line. So get the people that are now back into He-Man that want those old toys, because they really didn't, with Star Wars, they kind of sort of re-released things, but they were all a little different. That really kicked off a trend of, we're just going to put the old molds back into production and make the old toys again, which really spun a whole new. The
thing that's really cool about the Origins figures, actually Prince Adam up there is from Origins. They look like the vintage figures, but they have more articulation. So they have elbows and knees and stuff. So they're like way more playable, which is really nice. But this line, I have not been collecting a lot of it because I feel like a lot of it is rehashes.
I was just saying, is that real fur?
He's got like fake, faux fur accessory and stuff.
That's cool, because before they were always just like, some other plastic thing.
Yeah, so this guy is just so massive and then has like these fur accessories that I thought, it's really cool. I'm not collecting all of Masterverse, but when I see something really unique in that line, I'm going for it.
I'm noticing the logo. I really like anniversary logos.
Yeah.
I think that if they're done well, because sometimes they're awful, right? But those kind of anniversary logos are always neat to see how the designers pick like what's going to be the iconic thing for that year and that anniversary. And that's really because it's He-Man like doing I have the power.
Right.
Like, that is
with
cool.
the 40 around it. Yeah. That's awesome.
Really nicely done.
Yeah, so it's the 40th anniversary for He-Man this year, and it's the 40th anniversary of the G.I. Joe resized figures, not the 12-inch ones. So G.I. Joe does a weird like anniversary thing all the time where they swap back and forth. They'll do 25th anniversary and then celebrate the 50th anniversary like 2 years later.
Because it's the 25th anniversary of the 80s and the 50th anniversary of the 50s.
And they'll play back and forth just to celebrate it, which is kind of funny.
Well, it's always, when I was a kid, the obviously the 80s ones were like the big thing, and like no one really even talked about the early ones. No one cared about them. They were just like basically like male Barbie dolls. Like, right. No one really cared. And now it seems to be almost like they've managed to weave them, intertwine them a little better, where like both fan bases are now getting their due. Yeah, it's a very weird thing because it's such a big generational gap. There's not a lot of guys my age collecting the 12-inch stuff, and a lot of the older guys that are in the hobby don't collect the small figures, and it's like a weird thing. They try and balance it, at different points in time. They've had both lines, and that's kind of what's going on in a way with the He-Man stuff, where they're putting out stuff that looks retro and stuff that looks new, and I mean, they're even doing like, there's like a Netflix like kid show, like a kiddie show. And there's toys for that too, where it's like totally different styles. So there's like 3 different style toys out at once. Well, it's like that's the weird thing they did with the Masters. They have like they had the Revelations. Yep. And then they have like a kid He-Man, and then like the totally different style. Like people say, oh, go watch the He-Man show on Netflix. You're like, okay, I gotta specify which one. Yeah, because one's for kids and one's not really. I mean, it's just more mature. It's more mature. It's not like not for kids. Like, I wouldn't show it to like a 4-year-old, but you can show it to a 6-year-old. Right, exactly. Yes, it's a little bit more violent, a little bit more mature. There's higher stakes, and and the storylines. It's not an episode. It's serialized where it goes through, and that was my thing. Even when I was younger, like early teen, I didn't like. We all watched the TJF shows. Mm-hmm. You watch them now, they're awful. I mean, they were getting to be awful even back then. I'm like, these shows are terrible. But I really liked shows that had a more serialized storytelling to them. But no one else really liked that, especially when our age group. And I'm like, yeah, have you seen this show? Like, why are you watching shows for like 40-year-olds when you're 14? I'm like, because they're better than this. Yeah, well, I mean, that was one of the things like when anime kind of became big here in the 2000s, was like, look at how nice this is, not having like the Power Ranger effect of Monster of the Week. Right. Like it's actually like a story progressing through, it makes for a much more engaging story. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's not a special episode of the week where everything's wrapped up in 20 minutes. Oh, here's a problem. It's all done, and everything's like that day or like 2 days later. Like everything happens in a couple of days. Like you did all this in a day and a half. Like what? How does this resolve so fast? Like that's and like or it's supposed to happen in a week because the next week's storyline. Oh, remember last week when this happened? Wait, so did it happen last week or have it happened during the week? Like what? Right. Yeah. I think we're getting too into the minutia of family matters now. I think we've jumped the shark, and now we've like in episode 23, excuse me. Right. All right. So what did you bring for new to the collection? My new item is actually over here on the shelf. All right. Do you want to grab it? I will grab it. So we were at one of my favorite toy stores, and this store. I should wait till I'm back on the mic here before I say something. This store. Has been around for so long. It still exists now, obviously, but it's basically a in-person, live-action, physical eBay. Okay. I mean, it's not eBay where you have to bid on things, but there is just stuff floor to ceiling. You can find pretty much anything you want, and they have it somewhat curated where this is the Disney section, and this is the 45s, and this is the regular LPs, and this is the Muppet section. So where I always kind of darted to. And then you'd find some things that they misplaced every once in a while, but they were pretty good about knowing their stuff. So for years, that's where I would go. Okay. To get stuff for my collection, because they always would have estate sales, or they would pick things up from or whatever. So anyway, Dave from Cinema Sickness, right? We were at this store called Joys and Toys. It's in Hatboro. Okay. Shout out to Joys and Toys. I know they don't want a flood of people showing up there, but I just outed them. Because they do a good business, and they should get the promotion, right?
Yeah, no, we name drop stuff. It's like the tour of like New Jersey and Pennsylvania on this show. Everybody has like some place they name drop, and we're like, oh yeah, that's in Bucks County or it's wherever.
Well, because I was talking to them, and they're like, we don't want too much publicity because it's literally, it's not a big store, but it's not small either. But it's so packed.
Yeah.
That there is not a whole lot of room for a whole lot of people. They'd have to you got 20 minutes. Come in, walk around, and get out because they have like stuff everywhere. And it's a maze. You lean back too far and you might drop something. But anyway, Dave and I were in there, and I found this Baby Kermit Muppet Babies plush, but he has a vinyl head.
Right.
And I did some more research on this, and I never had these as a kid or in my collection before. And I did find out that I did have the Miss Piggy already in my collection in this line, and I have her in the box and everything.
With the vinyl head.
With the vinyl head. They only made 3. They made Kermit, Piggy, and Fozzie.
Okay.
And that was it in this line. But it's just an interesting figure because they did this a lot with Muppet toys. There's a scooter in the background you can see too.
Right.
So they did this weird thing where they made these very plush and soft toys with very hard heads or body parts. Like the scooter is very soft, and then his shoes are made of like concrete. I mean, it's not concrete, but it's like a very hard, barely movable, bendable, malleable rubber.
Right.
So as a kid, I remember, if you had somebody over and they were flinging that thing around, you could get a nice little
I remember even just like the eyes on some of the plush Muppet stuff. Like somebody's swinging around, you get whacked with the eyeballs.
Oh yeah, because they were all usually hard plastic. Because they made a couple that aren't, and they just.
It's really hard to get the right shape out of fabric.
Eden Toys did a Muppet stuff in the 90s to 2000s, and they were actually able to really kind of do it nicely.
Okay.
But they were the exception rather than the rule. And so that's why I think they did this, because they're like, okay, well, we want to get his face right, but how do we do this? Well, we'll just stick this vinyl head on this. So it's just really interesting because everything else is like there's cloth outfit, and I mean, it's super
and it's funny
soft.
because Kermit is made out of material like this, so you're used to this kind of material, and then the feet are kind of a different shade than the head.
Right.
It doesn't quite match up.
This is a Kermit green, it's fuzzy, and this is like plastic, and it's not even the same color. It's very bizarre. So when I saw that, and knowing that I didn't have it in my collection, even though it's not perfect, I'm like, I had to bite the bullet.
He's great. I like him a lot. Yeah,
it's very fun. It's that's the thing. Now it's like, I have so much stuff that when you find something weird, weird stuff
is more interesting than. I remember them doing the like holiday huggable things from McDonald's. I think they were. Everybody had one of them.
I actually a fan of my YouTube channel. Dave and I were out this weekend, just at a citywide flea market yard sale kind of thing, and all of a sudden I'm looking at something, and somebody just says, "Hey, I have something for you." And I didn't even know he was talking to me. I'm like, turn around, I'm like, oh, he's like, yeah. And he brings out those Muppet Babies from McDonald's, but still in their original bags. So tagged and bagged. And I'm like, that is something you don't see every day. Because otherwise, they are in every antique mall, flea market. I mean, they sold so well. I mean, that's the trick, right? If something sells so well, it's popular, that's good on the one end.
Right.
But when it becomes so popular that everybody had it, on the secondary market, it's useless because there is no collectible value to it because everybody had it.
You can still find it,
right? And so the those plush figures and the McDonald's Muppet Caper glasses, they are like everywhere.
It's true.
They're the most common Muppet items. People are like, oh, how much for this glass? Like, if you see it for more than $5, do not buy it. See if you're under $5, maybe pick it up, complete your collection. But like, if they're selling them for like $10 or $15 a piece,
it's too much.
You can go down the street. I can throw a rock at it. Oh, there's an antique store. I guarantee you they'll probably have at least one of them in there.
Right.
They're everywhere. But
that's cool. I love it. That's an awesome new piece.
Oh, it's nice to find funky stuff.
Speaking of funky stuff, we do a segment here sometimes where we talk about a peg warmer, something that just didn't sell well. Sometimes we talk about like a knockoff. You recently picked up just a very unusual, unique homemade piece. Oh yeah. So again, this is the weekend that I was out with Dave.
we were out at this citywide. Before I bring this out, I got to tell the story because once I bring this out, you're not going to be able to look at anything else. So we're at this flea market, a citywide flea market, and we go to this one table, right? And we see this thing, and I see it in a box. And I look down, I'm like, is that what I think it is? And I reach into this box, and I pull out this homemade Miss Piggy.
Crocheted.
Yeah, crocheting was a big thing in the 70s and 80s. And, one of not my grandmother, but my cousin's grandmother on the other side, she was a big crocheter. And so I have a couple of small Miss Piggies that she made. But I guess there must be some like a kit or something.
There must have been directions or something.
Yeah, because she made a couple of them that were very similar. But I never saw one like this before. I mean, and this almost looks like it could be a toilet paper holder or something. You put it over. You've seen those back in the day. But I mean, this whole thing is just nuts. Like this, the crazy Goldilocksy hair, the bizarre eyes.
She's even got a little pearl necklace.
The pearl necklace is there. The whole thing. She even has her pigtail.
Oh my gosh!
Shout out to the pigtail there. I mean, just bizarre. So I wasn't going to get this because it's like I don't really collect bootleg items. Really.
Yeah,
I mean, I have a couple things that I've gotten for free that were a part of a collection. Like my buddy, gave me a bunch of stuff. But I saw this. I was like, I don't know. And Dave's like, how much is this? The lady's like, $1. He's like, I'm buying this for you. You have to get this. And I was wearing a shirt with the Muppets on it. When I'm out and doing things, that's typically what I wear. So that shirt happened to have Miss Piggy on it. So I'm like holding it like, well, which one looks more legit? But it's just, it's something. I don't know what else to say about it.
Very unique.
It's a one of a kind.
Okay.
The lady told me that her mother-in-law made that.
Wow.
So you're not going to see this anywhere. This is an exclusive.
There you go.
It's a one of a kind. So look, you have the funky Miss Piggy and you have the baby Kermit. They're almost in scale there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty. So that was an interesting find. Was not expecting that, and not sure if if my nightmares can handle it. Do not look directly at it. You don't want to.
You're gonna wake up and she'll be in a new spot in the house.
It's like the elf on the shelf. Believe me.
So Muppets has been a brand overall that's been merchandised a lot through the years, which is a great thing. I mean, that's kind of how it funded itself in a lot of ways.
That's the dirty secret that I try to explain to people, that part of my blog is to help sell and promote the merch, because the merch is what helps drive the productions. Literally, the toys from the Muppet Show and Sesame Street are what helped fund the Dark Crystal.
Right.
That's how they made that.
It's very similar to Star Wars, where George Lucas was using the money from the toy sales to build ILM and all the other things he needed to keep making the movies.
Right. That's the dirty secret that people don't want to talk about. That's how these things get made. Yes, people say, oh, it's over commercialized. Yes, there are downsides to it. We've all seen. I mean, Star Wars is again a good example. Yeah. I mean, it's like a little much. Like, how many Baby Yodas could you possibly make? How many of these things? Like, it's the same thing. Oh, well, this time we're gonna make it with this slight.
He's got the frog in his hand this time.
Oh my god! And there's something to the collectability about that and variance. Mm-hmm. But sometimes all right, this is getting a little much, right? Yeah. Come on. But with the Muppets, Jim Henson was very, I don't know about hands-on, but his team was real specific on how things were made. Especially in the early years before they got too big. Yeah. They were real specific, and they wanted to make sure things were done correctly and the characters looked right, and that everything from the packaging was really well done. There was just a lot of details that the Muppet brand was known for, and they wanted to kind of convey in that. So that's the thing with the Muppets. It's a high quality item for the most part. There has been
of course
there's a few things here and there that are cheapo, and you're like, that's kind of weird. But for the most part, pretty quality stuff. All right, so what should we show next?
Do you want to focus on some of the ancillary stuff you have up on the shelves? You want to focus on the action figures first?
We can talk about what I brought here to kind of decorate the studio, just as an overview. So I brought this Pico quartz watch starring Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy. It's all in the package still. What I find interesting about this is that on the face of this, it doesn't say clock or watch or anything. On the side, it says a Muppet clock. So they had to put this sticker on the front because if you couldn't tell this was a clock,
right?
I mean, it's a face with moving hands with numbers on it. If you couldn't tell that's a clock, I don't know, but they felt the need to attach this sticker to the front of the package because you couldn't turn the side and see that it's a Muppet clock or know what a clock.
Just know it's a clock.
But so I thought that was fairly interesting. Then we have the Pigs in Space binder. It actually opens up.
That's amazing, like a school supply.
Oh yeah, the 3-ring binder and a what do you call that? Like a tablet,
like a clipboard holder. Yeah,
that's it.
So yeah, because that's not even like the brand; it's a skit within the show. Like it's not.
Yeah, they had posters. Notebooks, notepads. They had a whole thing.
That just
a
shows
lunchbox.
how popular that skit was.
Yeah, they didn't do anything else. Well, Electric Mayhem kind of had on the back of one of the lunchboxes, but yeah, they didn't have like a vet's hospital or the talking houses for the real Muppet fans. The talking houses, they should have got their own lunchbox. But yeah, Pigs in Space was so popular. Well, it was again Star Wars.
Yep.
Right. We're talking the late '70s, early '80s. Star Trek was back.
Yep.
With the movies. Star Wars blew the roof off everything, and so how do the Muppets capitalize on that? Pigs in Space, right? Yep. So put a Pigs in Space. Now you have Muppet stuff like that, and there's been talk over the years like of fans like wanting a Pigs in Space show, movie, something. Yeah. So now that this Electric Mayhem show is coming out, it might be time for a Pigs in Space.
And there's so much new stuff to parody. Like, there's so much sci-fi since then to draw little gags and things from.
They were doing YouTube skits in between. Basically, before the 2011 movie, and to help promote the 2011 movie, they were doing YouTube videos. They did Bohemian Rhapsody, all these things, and even after that, they were still doing some. Mm-hmm. And they made a Pigs in Space skit with Pepe, where Pepe is like the alien from Aliens.
Okay.
And he pops through and chest bursts through a link, and it is, when you're done, not now. After this, if you're done watching this, watch that YouTube video of Pigs in Space. It's like from, the late 2000s. It is hilarious. And like that shows that the Muppets can still be relevant in multiple time frames. And they're referencing something from 30 years before. And it's still good.
They're referencing something from when the show was on,
right?
That they didn't reference back then,
right? Because it might have been too much,
right?
It might have been too. Now, so you get that. Alien was R-rated. They were going to have toys for that.
Yeah,
right? Kenner was going to have toys for that, and they were like, "We can't release toys for this. It's an R-rated movie." Now there's Predator toys. Yep. They don't care about anything anymore. Like that's an old. The collector market has changed so much. Like, okay, a 40-year-old is going to buy this. R-rated or not, they're not going to give it to their kid, so who cares? Right. So now that they can reference these kind of things. So we have the Pigs in Space notebook binder thing. We have a Sesame Street carryabout, and what this is, I can actually pick this off the shelf here. It opens up, and it's a whole little carrying case for your Sesame Street 45s.
Wow.
And they're all book and record sets.
Okay.
So they have, this is the couple of songs from the original album. This is the Hello. It literally says hello.
Yeah.
So this is like your first introduction. This is probably the theme song and hello. Then they get into letters.
Oh my gosh! Look at that old Big Bird.
I have another copy of this signed by Carol Spinner.
Oh, that's great.
So I had that first before I found this. I didn't know it was a whole set. And then I was like, oh, now I got to find the whole set. And then, of course, after letters, you have numbers. Of course.
Logical.
And after numbers, you have shapes and up and down. So you got spatial relations and shapes. Then, of course, you have people in your neighborhood and somebody come and play. But it's like people and play. So interesting how they kind of
tied them together. Yeah, little alliteration.
And then, of course, obviously, if you have that, then you have going for a ride and I love trash. Nice. I don't know how that fits in there. It's like, okay, well, it's travel and the junk around your house, right? So like, okay, we'll throw that one in there too. So there is some sort of have a theme. Then you're like,
that one's just like, we got to put out I love trash because people like that one.
Something here, right? And then it all folds up in this nice little carrying case. And you could, You can take this
Take
on
your
your way.
LPs to your
Because,
neighbor's house, listen.
The other piece of this, right? The other piece from our age is that there was no streaming.
Right.
There was, I mean, this is so far back. This is from the early 70s. There wasn't even VHS yet.
Right.
There wasn't
right.
any video stores. They didn't even have home video. Like, no laser discs, no CEDs. So what you had were the records of these shows.
Yeah.
And the storybooks and the activity books. And that is how you interacted and became engaged with that show when it wasn't on.
Relived things you enjoyed from it, to
Right.
see it again, hear it again.
Because you couldn't just put it on.
Right.
You couldn't tape it
Right.
and watch it later. You didn't have any of that. So that's when I was this makes it sound old, but
Yeah.
when I was a kid. But when I was a kid, I got a lot of my older cousins' hand-me-downs. That's actually how I got into the Muppets, because that's like the big question. Right? How did you get into this? Well, people asked me recently, what was your first item? And I tell them, I can't even tell you what my first item is, because it all kind of came as a lump. I had the Muppet Show soundtrack, the Muppet Movie soundtrack, the original Sesame Street cast soundtrack, and a few of the Fisher-Price dolls, and we'll show some of the action figures in a minute. But they all kind of came. I have no idea like what order they. Because people say, "Well, how did you have that as a kid?" They were my cousins.
Yeah.
And they took decent care of it. So when it got to me 10 years later, I mean, I had things that were. I was born in 1979 to age myself, so we can put a date on it. So I mean, but I was born after the Muppet movie came out. I was not coming out of the womb saying, "Give me my Muppet movie soundtrack.
Yeah.
I want that Rainbow Connection, man. Come on, like let's go." So that all came from them.
Yeah. No, we had a lot of hand-me-downs when I was a kid too. We had the Sesame Street Fisher-Price playset that had the little guys.
Oh, yeah.
We lived in the Bahamas for like 3 months from my dad's work, and I lost Cookie Monster and Big Bird in the waves down there. So we had it, like, I remember having like Mr. Hooper and Ernie and Bert still like years later.
I did that so many times on the shore. I would take my PVC figures, bury them in the sand, and and my dad's like, you don't do that. You're gonna learn. I'm like, oh, I marked it with a
find
stick.
it, yeah.
And like, you're not finding that. You turn your head. You're like, oh, everything looks the same now. You're like digging up, like you got to dig up like a whole thing. Like, oh, it's over there, and you still could miss it, right? Like, oh man. So I know that I've lost a few figures. I've since regained them thanks to the powers of the internet.
Yes.
But like when you were a kid, especially when we were kids, we didn't have that.
No, there's
ability.
no way to track it down.
There's no way. You didn't know. Like there was some kind of stores, but you didn't even know about these stores because you had to look them up in the phone book or something.
Yeah.
Like how did you find these places? If you were driving down the street and saw a place, that's how you knew about it as a kid.
Yeah.
Otherwise, nothing. You were not. Let me look up T for toys in the phone book,
and you certainly were watching YouTube videos where someone's saying, "Hey, I go to this place,"
right. It's like such a different experience now. Like here's a quick one. I was trying to track down the Muppet Show book because again, back in the day, that's how you experience a show. So I had the album and I really wanted the book. Friends of mine had the book, but they lived in Virginia. So every time I would go there to Virginia, I'm like, run upstairs, like the highlight of the trip, run upstairs, and I would photocopy pages because they were just beginning to have like printers and I guess scanners or something. But they had some kind of office materials at their house, and I would scan these things in or like it was nuts. And I could color it in, use that as a coloring book, not in the book itself because I was smart enough for that.
Yeah,
like on the printed out pages, but I finally found a copy. Was it that or Muppets and Men? It might have been Muppets and Men, but that was like a big thing I wanted to find for years and I could not find. And then Muppets and Men I finally found on eBay, and it was like, I don't even know, like $90, $100. It was so hard to find.
Right. So
I bit the bullet, saved up, like here it is. I found as early as eBay, and then I don't even know. Of course, I don't know. Maybe a weekend, 2 days later. I mean, it was like very, very recently. My neighborhood was having a flea market or something. I was like 2 streets down. Like,
right. In the neighborhood.
This girl was like, had a blanket out and like, of course, there's a Muppets and Men. And I was like, all right, how much do you want for this? She goes, like $1. I'm like, done. I'm like, I just paid like $90 for this like 2 days ago. Like, are you for real right now? And I've been looking for this for years, and of course I find 2 copies of it. Like that's how these things always go.
It's how it like when you're looking for something, you cannot find it, and then as soon as you have it, you got 4 of it.
Right.
Like,
yeah, that's crazy. But all right, so we would show some of this other old stuff, or we should, I guess, finish up with this background stuff. I guess so. There's the scooter we were talking about with the cement legs, the cement sneakers. We have a Muppets Studio hat. That was a D23 exclusive.
okay.
And then we have the NECA Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures. And some people are like, well, why is that there? For those of you who don't know, the Jim Henson Company created the costumes for the first 2 live-action Turtles. I've still yet to see the 3rd one. I kind of had a boycott since I was a kid.
It's like, not as good.
Because the Hensons didn't have anything to do with it.
The suits are not as good, and the story's just a lot goofier. Those first 2 movies, though, the suits look so good. Especially the Turtles.
Right.
Because I do feel like Toka and Razar...
Yeah, they get a little...
They're
funky,
cool looking,
right.
but they're not as, like... perfectly animated. The lip sync on the Turtles looks great,
and they're so bulky that they're moving. Listening to some of their articulate,
they're moving goofy. They have that big bulky costume movement
kind of thing. But yeah, so I don't collect a whole lot of Turtle stuff because again, it gets really crazy.
Yeah, it's a whole nother rabbit hole.
And I mean, when I was a kid, I was very into the show. So when they cross-pollinated, I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
but I try to stick now to like the movie related specific things and just a couple things. These are really hard to find because collectors it's a very popular movie. So now, when you collect things, sometimes your collection dovetails with other people's collections.
Right.
And that is definitely one where it's like, you start getting like, oh, these people are really into their turtles.
The turtle people are rabid.
I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I need to have some turtles to exemplify that era.
I think the first Turtles movie is the last production Jim worked on, right?
He was there. The Witches. He was a part of that too. The Angelica Houston movie, The Witches. Those were the last 2 like theatrical movies he had any kind of real part on. But the last movie that I guess you could call it a movie, he directed was Muppet Vision 3D.
Oh, right. Okay.
Which wasn't, it's not really a movie, but that's the last thing he directed.
Gotcha.
And that came out a year after he died.
He passed away. Yeah.
But Muppet Vision 3D is fantastic.
Yeah.
And then the last but not least, we have this Muppet Treasure Island style guide. So that is the style guide that was sent out to licensees to make sure that they got the characters right, the colors right, and patterns. We're going to show that as an exclusive.
We will do a special Patreon bonus clip. So if you are part of the Muppet Stuff Patreon or if you're part of the Pegwarmers Patreon, that'll be coming out very soon after this episode. We'll share it on both of them so you can check it out if you remember either one of those. So some bonus content.
Bonus content exclusives, right? This is our version of San Diego Comic-Con. It's our exclusive. So we'll go a little more in depth in that in those videos. Check them out. But otherwise, that's all our background material here. Then we get into some of our props in the front.
Yes.
So I know this is a big action figure, related.
We definitely focus on action figures in the majority of the episodes. Yep.
So I didn't want to stray too far. So I know people are like, I'm not going to watch this Muppet episode. What's this guy going to show? I mean, we're here for action figures. So here's where I'm here for you. So I brought Muppet action figures from all over the decades.
Okay.
Just to kind of show how they evolved and show the different ways they were released. So obviously the first we have the Muppet Show players. Now, these are made by Fisher-Price, 1979, I believe, and they were released 2 ways. So you had this set that was Kermit, Rolf, Miss Piggy, and Fozzie, and the interesting thing about this set is all of them are unarticulated, basically, figures, except for their legs.
Right, they can be seated.
Right, which is odd, except for 2 figures. Miss Piggy, who was a finger puppet for some reason, and Animal, whose arms and head moved.
Yes. It's a weird thing to have an inconsistent articulation in a line. Even like Gonzo and Scooter have more articulation.
Right. So then
they're more standard action figure articulation. They have arms and legs.
So then they expanded the line or whatever it was. They had those figures that were like action figures. You're like, well, how come Kermit couldn't have his arms? Kermit's, you see him in the front.
Yeah.
He's like stuck there, and you're like, what? I've never seen Kermit do that pose. It's very strange. So then here we have Fozzie. This is how they were
right, single carded,
and you'll see unpunched.
Nice.
Look at that, huh? So I recently got this because I'm upgrading the one I have. Is a little more beat up. So like I found this one. Like, ooh, this one's like a little mintier.
I have very vivid memories of like a five and dime. Not a five and dime. It was like a gift shop in Dublin, Pennsylvania, near the grocery store my mom went to every week, and getting to pick out. I got Rolf, my sister got Kermit, and later I went back and got Scooter, I'm sorry.
There is no Skeeter.
Right.
She's only part of the imagination of Miss Piggy. Because the Muppet Babies don't actually exist. They are just a figment of Miss Piggy's imagination as they showed in Muppets Mayhem Manhattan.
Right.
In theory. If you go by somewhat of the canon.
The canon. Yeah, but I vividly remember seeing them hanging on the pegs, and I was born in 82, so they were produced for a while for me to have seen them and not be, a baby.
Oh, yeah. I remember them being in, now here's a throwback, Kitty City.
Ooh, Kitty City.
I remember seeing them in Kitty City, and that was, 85, 4 or 85.
Yeah.
I mean, they were releasing them for years. So, but they were extremely popular. Mm-hmm. The crazy thing about them, like I said, so half of them have articulation, half of them don't. And then they came with this stick.
The rod, yeah.
And I've never seen any other figures from Fisher Price like this. So you took this stick, and there's a hole in the back of them, and you put this thing in there, and it pops in, and then
now you can puppeteer.
You puppeteered it like this, and you're like, who thought of this? Why would you spent the money on this piece of plastic that like everybody lost, right? Like everyone just like took this thing out
and played with the figure.
And no one really needed this thing. And then you're like, you could have spent the money for this plastic and like done something else to make Fozzie's head movers. It's just bizarre. Like, so what do you do with this?
I agree. I agree. I don't know what you were supposed to do with the sticks. We had them as kids and never used them.
They stand up on their own. So it's not like some of these figures today were like, oh, you need to use this because it needs to have a base. No, it stands up fine. I mean, this one's a little funky, but like, you don't need. wait, I want to get this on. I want to get this on the mic. It really like clips in there. It's bizarre, but yeah, these were just so well done, and so many people from our age, even if you really weren't a Muppet fan, you go to someone's house, they probably had one of these because somebody's grandmother was like, "Here you go." I'm like, "I want a G.I. Joe. I didn't want Fozzie Bear." Ha ha, Waka Waka. The joke's on you. Now you got Fozzie Bear as your Christmas present because everybody had these. So you could go to people's houses and play with, make your own thing. They didn't make anything that really was more interactive though, which I thought was kind of interesting. Like they made a Shrinky Dink set where it had a lot more characters because they could, you could shrink them down.
They're just cheap plastic.
Yeah, and I mean, I learned the hard way that ovens are hot. With I think a lot of kids did. I think a lot of kids were like, your mom was also like, "Yeah, get back, it's hot." Nah, it's just Kermit. Joe, okay, ovens are hot. Oh, I get it now. But that had like a whole stage that came with it. These, like, I guess you could cut the back of this box. At the back of this box kind of has like a little
curtain.
Kind of curtain.
Yeah, they kind of show the sticks there, like, Yeah,
and they show here's Kermit like sliding into home on the top here. Like, what is going on? It's very strange. Like, I don't quite understand the pitch reel. Those things like. I would love to be the fly on the wall in that room. Hey, I got this idea.
It had to be like somebody at Fisher Price was like, well, they're puppets. We got to have a puppet feature. Like somebody just like was hung up on the fact that you have to be able to puppeteer them somehow.
Right. So you puppeteer all those. So and Miss Piggy, you puppeteer A.
With your finger.
But she also has a hole in the back for the bag too. So like. Someone could, in theory, like inceptualize. Right? Inception is it. Right? So I'm puppeteering it, and someone else could be puppeteering my finger while I'm puppeteering the Miss Piggy. Like, don't think about it too hard, kids. All right, so that was the 70s, and then they didn't have a whole lot of Muppet figures. Well, they did do Sesame Street.
Yes.
And with Sesame Street, this is the bizarre thing. So this came out from These were made by Tara Toys, and this is 85. Okay, so
I had that Big Bird also.
85 Tara Toys Big Bird. Now, now again, it's a few years later.
Right.
But they didn't do any other Sesame Street action figures. This is the only time they did Sesame Street action figures. The rest of them were just PVCs. Palisades, who we'll see in a minute, did try to do a Sesame Street line. That was the next expansion, but unfortunately went out of business before that came to fruition. But they put these out. I wanted these as a kid so bad, but I was a little too old.
Yeah.
By 86, 85 for like Sesame Street toys. I was like, my parents were like, that show's for babies. You know your letters and numbers and your I love trash. But I did see these when I would go to other kids' houses, like your younger kids or whatever,
right.
siblings, whatever would have these, and I'm like, oh, I really love it, and because they're really well done.
Yeah, it looks like the character. It has articulated arms. The head turns. You can rotate the feet. That's probably the worst part of it. Like, it's not really articulated the feet, but yeah, there's like a swivel cut real low under his belly, sort of, and the feet can rotate. But at least the movable arms and the movable head made him a pretty fun toy. And he's pretty big, so like he's that guy next to like the Fisher-Price Ernie and Bert actually looked kind of good from when I was a kid playing with them.
Yeah, you could kind of see on the back that
they did do some scale.
Yeah, he's a little bigger than some of the other figures in the line. Obviously not much bigger.
Right.
I mean, but he's still bigger than even the Muppet figure. So
yeah.
I mean, obviously he's a little higher in the package, not by much, but so it kind of works for this line too. So you can kind of play both, even though obviously Tara Toy and Fisher-Price were rivals. It still kind of works.
Right.
But after that, they didn't do any more action figures for Sesame Street. I guess they figured, okay, the market is a little too, that's a little too high for our market, right?
Yeah.
Thumb it down a little bit. And they've made PVCs of Sesame Street figures ever since.
Yes.
Or now at Sesame Place, they'll have large action figures.
Okay.
They're, barely action figures, like the head, maybe some arms, but they're like this big.
Okay.
But, that's that. They don't want a kid breaking off the arm, I guess.
They don't want any choking hazards and all that. Yeah,
I'm assuming. You could almost eat one of these PVC figures for some of these things. Some of the PVC, I've seen some Oscars they've made. You're like, a kid could eat very easily swallow that. Come on. Can and all. You could eat this guy. All right, so after the 90s, in the late 90s, Palisades Toys got the Muppet license, and they made what has since become probably the standard bearer, not just of Muppet action figures, but pretty much a standard bearer. I've heard people from action figure collectors for all lines. It's one of the top lines of any action figure pretty much ever produced.
It's very nicely detailed, very extensive character selection.
Yeah, and that's key, because for so long, Kermit, Miss Piggy, Fozzie, Animal. Okay, I love the Muppets. That's fantastic. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But there are a ton of Muppets.
Yes, so there's a ton of fantastic characters.
Let's expand. So the first one they released was, and I will have to reach down here to grab it, was my favorite character, Dr. Teeth.
Excellent.
And this was a Wizard World. They don't call it Wizard World anymore, but Wizard World Philadelphia released this as an exclusive, and it was a different color than the traditional character and the traditional action figure that they put out later.
Okay.
And so they made something like 200, maybe 300 of these. Ken Lilly, the head of Palisades, told me that this and the White Tux Rolf figure are probably the two most limited figures they ever did, including some of the other ones they did for like industry exclusives and other things. Like there's everyone knows there's the wide range that are readily available stuff. Then there's the exclusives. Then there's the variants. And then they also did things like this Dream Date Gonzo here, which were industry exclusive, or you had to be at an event.
Okay.
So this one was for the 20th annual Maryland Small Business Awards breakfast. Oh. Were you invited to that?
No, I missed that one. I didn't get an invite.
I think I was out of town that weekend. I couldn't get there. But so the magic of eBay, and there used to be a great forum that first was on Muppet Central, and then it moved over to Palisades having their own forum.
Okay.
And you got to talk to the makers of these toys and tell them kind of what characters, all these things. And it really made the toy line that much better because fans were helping to create it.
That's such a unique thing from that era. There was like that time period where forums were really hot and the toy companies were willing to interact.
Right.
Now they're all so worried about like legally, like we took somebody's idea or we said we might release this and then we decide not to. Like now they like barely want to talk to the fans in that direct approach.
Right.
But there was a period of time, especially with the smaller companies, where that was like a huge thing.
So I actually was an intern at the Henson Company.
Oh wow!
At the end of college, and one of my tasks was to go through the archives and send them photos to help them with the action figures. So the ones I remember helping them with specifically were like Clifford, because I was able to find pictures from the Jim Henson Hour where they showed the back of him, because you never saw them from the back. Things like that. So I was helping them to find good reference material to make these figures that much better. But yeah, so they had these, and then you had repaints of characters they already put out. Like, so this was just like they already had Gonzo, and they put him in a blue top. They just painted it blue and said, "Oh, here's an exclusive."
And that's how most exclusives are. There's to make an action figure, it's about $100,000 for a mold. So when they're going to do a limited edition thing, it's almost always a repaint because they just can't.
Right.
They're not going to recoup the money.
Right. Or they add an accessory. They do something.
Right. They add something small that they can.
So yeah, this was the Dr.
really
Teeth
cool.
from that line, and it's become a very sought after piece because it was, it looks like a regular version, like it's on the same kind of carded packaging, but that was a Wizard World exclusive.
So is it his outfit that's a different paint scheme?
Yep.
Okay.
That's all the thing. That's it.
Yeah.
But they made so little of those.
Yeah, that's
that
right.
it becomes like, and that was the first ever figure released.
Wow.
The figures were coming out, like, let's say.
It was almost a way to promote the line was to have the exclusive come out
Correct.
first.
Yeah, it was like the main group is coming out, let's say, in September, and this was like August or July or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I was at that show, if I got it online later, because I was living in California at the time. So I don't know I wasn't able to get to that. I'm not sure if I was able to get to buy it in person, but I think I got it online. I can't quite remember, or I might even had somebody like be at the show and be like, can you pick this up for me because I can't get there? And what was it like? Maybe it was like $20. And
Right.
500, 1,000. I mean, like it's like crazy. But yeah, that's not. And it's Dr. Teeth.
Yeah.
And it was the first one. So I'm like,
You gotta have it.
I gotta have this. And it was really the first one I bought. It wasn't like then the other stuff hadn't come out yet. One of my other favorite figures from that line is this guy right here. Now, do you know who this is?
I don't know his name. I recognize that it is from the Muppets, line, but
So this is Uncle Deadly.
okay.
And he's a character that was originally shown on the Muppet Show, the first season or two.
Okay.
He really got his claim to fame in the Vincent Price episode. He really got his time to shine. And then they really didn't use him at all until the 2011 Muppet movie. Jason Segel, who helped write that and starred in it, was a huge Muppet fan. And he said that, or maybe it was either him or the director, James Bobbin, both were big Muppet fans, and they were talking about the villain sidekicks, and they're like, well, why don't you throw Uncle Deadly in there as the sidekick? And like, oh, okay. We haven't used that puppet, and they had to remake him because I don't think they had him for 30 years at that point, whatever it was. So they brought him back and remade him for that movie, and then the Muppets, the 2015 show. Get back to that nonsense again. He really got this new personality, this new persona where he was the behind the scenes assistant to Miss Piggy and helped her with like wardrobe and things. Huh. And he's like so macabre and he's so like weird, like evil looking almost, but he has like this like flamboyant personality. And he's like, well, Miss Piggy, I don't know how this will look on you, but she could lose a few pounds though, or something. And it's like that kind of, it's really funny. And so he's got this whole new lease on life of this character. But this is the only piece of like really Uncle Deadly merch they've ever done. Huh. And now that he's a bigger character, I'm hoping they do a little more. But it's funny how they said the depth of characters, because this was put out before the 2011 movie, like 10 years before.
Okay.
So you're talking about a character that only really fans knew, that hadn't even been used in like 2 decades. And the detail is amazing. A buddy of mine helped them, did all the mock-ups and helped them really with the quality control. And they found in the production process, looking through the archival photos, that Uncle Deadly had this tail. So nowhere on the show
did you ever see it. And they didn't even know it existed, but they found this, I think it might have even been like in a book form or something, like, oh, we got to get that tail in there. It's like just adds so much to the sculpt, it adds so much to the character. So they put this tail in, and that was the first time anybody ever seen really saw his tail like that. Yeah, it is one of those funny things with Muppet characters and the Sesame Street characters that so many of them you don't really see their legs. So toys sometimes become that kind of rare glimpse at that. I still remember as a kid, just my mind being blown a couple times where like Oscar would like pick up the can and you'd see the green feet. I'm like, that's so weird.
That was cool. And the other thing they did with Oscar was Carol Spinney would perform his third. People know that Carol Spinney performed both Big Bird and Oscar. Most people know that. If you don't know that, you just heard it. Now you know. But he also performed a character called Bruno. And Bruno was the trash man. And he was Oscar's sidekick for a while. And what Bruno was able to do is a puppet within a puppet. So Carol Spinney would be inside this thing.
The humanoid character,
right,
yeah.
With fake arms
that hold
holding
the can.
Oscar's can. So Carol Spinney would have his one hand up here doing Bruno's mouth and his other hand doing Oscar inside the can that he was holding. And he was able then to walk around the street and all the set and have Oscar without having to use like a little person to do that little can thing.
Right.
And so that was a really ingenious way to get Oscar around, because otherwise, like, you got to do that. You got to get the little person or whatever, a kid, I don't know what they did.
Yeah.
Right? To do that and blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, this is...
Or you're just stuck where he can, every scene, they have to go to him to use him. Yeah.
You have. So, I mean, I'm sure you have, so I'll ask, but have you seen Christmas Eve on Sesame Street?
Yes.
Okay. So at the very beginning of that special... The beginning of that special is so bizarre because it shows the Sesame Street characters ice skating, but they're all like people in costumes.
Right.
Which is just...
kind of like the live,
it looks like Sesame Street on ice or something. It's very strange. But all of a sudden they cut to Oscar, and to get him off of the ice rink and get him back in the street, they throw him down the stairs. So the can is just like... bam, 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 and then he pops up as the puppet like, well, all right, I'm back. It's like... That's how they were getting around him, like being able to move. They're like, literally, let's just throw him down the stairs.
Which is kind of a Muppety kind of gag, you know?
Yeah, but for Sesame Street, it's almost like unheard of because they do not treat the characters like
the same way, right?
Yeah, they don't
have the explosions and stuff.
They don't beat them up on Sesame Street. They do like, they do some kind of gags and things, but like not like not like that hardcore. So here's this Christmas special, and 2 minutes in, Oscar's getting thrown down the stairs. Like, geez, oh man, all right, we're off to a weird start with this. But it is what it is. All right, so anyway, after Palisades...
Right. Do you know about how many years that line ran?
Oh, I think about 5 or 6, maybe even longer. I mean, it ran for a good long time. I mean, it had its ups and downs. It started out with exclusives, and then it was the first 2 or 3 series were released at Toys R Us. Mm-hmm. They were really wide released. And then... oh, well, there's not a Kermit in this line. There's not a Miss Piggy in this wave or whatever. And all of a sudden they're like, well, no one really needs X character. No one really wants this. So Toys R Us started pulling back and wouldn't sell them.
A wave becomes a Pegwarmer, the name of the show. If it doesn't have that sales velocity.
So they stopped buying into the line.
Yeah.
So the line went to like GameStop and a couple other places went online. And then a lot of like things like Uncle Deadly, they would do... online exclusive. So there was actually 3 different Uncle Deadlies. There was like a reprint where he glowed in the dark. He glowed in the dark?
Glowed?
Sure.
Glow?
There was a glow in the dark version.
There was a glow in the dark variant, yes. We speak good English.
Oh, yeah. So there was that. And then that went for a while. And then Diamond Select, and I can take this out of there.
Yeah.
Diamond Select came out with their version, and it ran for a good while. And then they had the same kind of problem that Palisades had, where stores were just not buying the line. So it took a while to complete. They put prototypes of This is Sam Eagle and Rizzo the Rat.
Right.
And this is the last figure, presumably, in the line. So we have the first figure from the Palisades, and this is the last figure from the Diamond Select line, in theory. So what they did here is they showed these prototypes off, I want to say 2018, 17. I mean, it was a wild. So this right now, this is 2022.
Yes.
So
Filming in 22.
Let's just put that out there in case you're watching. You're like, when do they make this thing? So this was shown at Toy Fair years ago, and we've been bugging them ever since for it. And they're like, well, we don't have a real release strategy for it because the stores aren't buying these, and aren't taking them. But they found a niche in comic book stores and specialty kind of retail shops. And when they started doing the best of the figures series, they were able to then re-release the Kermits and the Miss Piggies and all this stuff. And then that's how they got Floyd and Janice out. And then all of a sudden it stopped again. You're like, well, you have Animal, Floyd, and Janice. We need Dr. Teeth and Zoot. Right. At least. Lips. I love Lips. People don't know Lips is the trumpet player from Electric Mayhem. Love Lips. But at least give me that much to complete the band. And so that became a big thing because they released it as a giant box set for San Diego Comic-Con that they said that's the only way to get these figures.
Yeah.
And then like 3 months later, maybe 6 months later, they released them in this kind of box. You're like, I just spent like $200 for this box set. And it's cool because it's the stage like they actually they used in the show, but you couldn't really reuse it. Once you opened the package, it didn't really have like a playability. Whereas Palisades actually put out a Dr. Teeth Electric Mayhem stage,
like bandstand thing.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like they did a lot of cool accessories and play sets.
Play sets. Yep.
The backstage play set is like amazing. I mean, that's such a cool piece because you can use. It's actually almost more to scale with these figures in some aspects. They made the desk a little too big for Kermit because he's like here. You're like, well, Kermit can't even use his own desk. It's bizarre. But yeah, so if you notice on the back of this, they show all these accessories that Sam was supposed to come with: a light and an easel with like a propaganda sign of him running for president, and none of that, and a phonograph.
Okay.
And none of that is included. Just his podium.
Wow.
And it's like you had years. You showed these things like X amount of years ago. You putting this in production. You knew those weren't coming with it. You couldn't just Photoshop these out.
Because the desk is really the only thing he's interacting with on the back. They could have easily whited out the other things.
Right. And Rizzo is it's a shame because he looks really good, but he's so big.
Yes.
For he's almost the size. If people have put them out side by side, he's almost the size of the Gonzo figure. And like they made a Bean Bunny figure as an accessory, sort of to I think it was in the Kermit package, but he's like twice the size of Bean Bunny almost. You're like, all right, a rat is not bigger than a bunny.
Right.
Or at least I would hope not. Maybe a New York. I mean, he is a New Jersey rat, but oh man. But yeah, not even a slice of pizza. No. Yeah. So you go from like Palisades had all these great accessories, and Diamond. I'm glad they put these out. I'm not poo-pooing them in any way in that kind of context, but it's like it would have been nice to have like, I mean, a slice of cheese. would not have broke your budget.
You can tell that set got cost reduced like crazy. And, in the long run, probably better to drop accessories than drop paint apps because then the toy doesn't look as good,
But it's just a shame. And yeah, so you see Rizzo, he's like so massive. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, I was looking at it and was trying to figure out if Sam was too small or Rizzo was too big.
Sam is massive.
Yeah, in the show he seems very big.
He's not too big as a figure. He's probably somewhere in line. The version of him that Palisades put out is massive.
Yes, too. I remember that one being big.
Yeah, I mean, and it's nicely done because that's the thing with the Palisades. If they would have scaled them down just slightly, and especially with the play sets and everything, if they just slightly, they probably would have saved themselves just enough money to make more.
Yeah.
But the problem was they were buying a whole bunch of licenses all at the same time. So right after this was their big one. They had done like some smaller lines, but this was like their showcase franchise that they were acquiring. Then it got into like Ren and Stimpy, and they did a bunch of they did really cool figures, but they were big. And you're like, and then like sadly, so like we had mentioned before, they were going to expand the Muppet line And since the Henson Company still owned the Sesame Street character rights and Fraggle Rock and all those, they were going to expand them, and they were going to release a test Gobo Fraggle figure as part of the Muppet line. It's kind of because at a certain point it started out as the Muppet Show, and then it changed into the Muppets, just Jim Henson's Muppets. So it was like more generic. So they were going to stick the Fraggle Rock characters in the Muppets line.
Yeah.
Because when you watch your old Fraggle Rock, it actually still says, starring Jim Henson's Muppets. Now they don't call them the Muppets. They try not to get away with it because they don't own the Muppet name anymore.
They don't blur the line between the different groups as much.
Yeah, the new Fraggle Rock, Back to the Rock on Apple TV, they don't call them. It doesn't say starring Jim Henson's Muppets, but the old.
The original, yeah.
Sometimes there's a cut I saw that when they were, I think when Disney released them or something, that it didn't. They cut that part out, like they did an alternate cut, so it didn't say like starring Jim Henson's Muppets. But
weird.
Anyway, but so yeah, they were also going to do Sesame Street, and those they have a line of prototypes. They got to the prototype stage. They got to the boxed prototype stage. So if you come across them, they are extremely rare and hard to find, and they go for like crazy money
because they're
like 2 offs or something.
There might be two or three that exist. Yeah.
Right, and they're really well done. I mean, they were coming out with, I think, Ernie and Oscar and Guy Smiley, and I believe the Two-Headed Monster were like the first wave. And they were going to come with like letters and numbers and like Muppet type letters and numbers, and they were going to come with a piece of the street. So then you would be able to build. Like a flat piece, and you're just gonna build a playset. I'm like that. I mean, it's so cool, but sadly not meant to be. I'm sure you've seen Blake Wright's books.
Yes.
If anyone watching doesn't know who Blake Wright is, he's this toy, his kind of historian author that has these books called "The Toys That Time Forgot."
Yeah,
they were like a Kickstarter. You can still kind of get them on Amazon.
And we featured the first one in an episode on toy guides.
Okay.
On the show, yeah.
So I've been following him, and we've been talking about things, and he's got the next volume's coming out. I've been getting all his books because there's always a section or two of unproduced Muppet stuff in there.
Gotcha.
He dealt with the Dark Crystal line that they kind of remade recently.
Yeah.
Reaction kind of took that off, and I kind of redid it from those early designs and actually made those figures. And then the Palisades Muppet line that never meant to be. So it's really, those are really cool books to see what could have been.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I guess what could have been, when you come to some of these things, one of the stages of production is a prototype. So this is a maquette, and I'll show you how you can see how heavy that thing is.
Wow! Yeah,
that's solid.
Yeah.
So that is a Muppet Babies Baby Kermit maquette that was used, I believe, for both the drawing. They could get a wraparound, and I think as a mold as well. And that's actually signed on the bottom.
I saw
by the Henson creative director at the time, Craig Yo.
Okay.
So I noticed a couple things on eBay, and I said to the seller, I'm like, how did you get these? These are like, I've never seen these in this condition before. And he's like, oh, because they're mine. I designed them. And I was like, oh, no kidding. So, what else you got, man?
Yeah.
And so we talked to me. I got this. So I got a bunch of things from him. And I said, I have one favor to ask. If you could just sign everything.
Yeah.
So he signed fanny packs that he designed for me, all kinds of boxes, all kinds of different things, and these.
So this is probably a resin copy of a sculpt that he had done, because I can see there's a mold line on it.
Yep. And it made.
There you go.
This Remco Baby Kermit and Baby Piggy Muppet Babies gift set, and you could see that I think it's a squeeze toy.
Okay.
So it goes from that hard plastic thing there to this like super rubbery squeeze toy. So it's Kermit and Piggy and a rattle in there as well. So you get squeeze toy and Baby Kermit squeeze toy, Baby Miss Piggy squeeze toy, and a fun rattle. Literally, that's what it says.
A fun rattle.
Fun rattle.
It's not just a regular rattle or a boring rattle.
No.
Fun.
If this was a boring rattle, this would be a Pegwarmer. Take it right back and let it sit on the shelf, because I'm not.
It better be fun.
My baby cannot be having boring rattle. Fun rattles, nothing at all. So very cool. So when I actually got that first.
Okay.
and was on the
then
hunt.
you have to get
And I'm trying to figure out, what toy does that go to? Did they use it for like something like this? Did they use it just as like a design element to help them, get a shape from behind for books or something? And then I happen to see this, and I'm like,
it's the same pose.
This is definitely it.
Yeah.
And it's in the box and everything. Sold.
Very cool.
That's the kind of fun stuff you're like, all right, now I'm on the hunt.
Yeah, you're doing detective work and you're discovering things. Yeah.
Yeah, this was released, I think, in '89.
Okay.
So I mean, and I was 9. I definitely was not collecting Muppet Baby stuff.
Right.
That was one of the things. I did not want to collect Muppet Baby stuff. I had made like a pact with myself. Like,
Okay.
I will collect maybe some Sesame Street, obviously Fraggle Rock, obviously like Dark Crystal Labyrinth, all that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to collect Muppet Baby stuff.
I loved Muppet Babies as a kid.
I mean, I watched the show, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But
I'm just a couple years younger than you, though, so I was still like in that age where it wasn't too babyish. Like the Happy Meal toys I had.
oh, it wasn't even that. I mean, I had the Happy Meal toys, I had the plush, I had those things. But when it came to like buying things when I was like 10, 11 years old,
Yeah.
when I would go to the stores and buy Muppet Baby stuff, it got a little weird. Plus the fact that at that point in time, Muppet Babies had supplanted the Muppets, basically.
Yes. Oh, for sure.
I mean, the Muppets Take Manhattan in 1985 or 4, whatever it was. And then there was not a Muppet movie out. They did a couple of specials from then till the 90s, but that was really it.
Yeah.
They were focusing on, they Follow That Bird movie, Labyrinth, but there was no Muppet movie. And like I said, a couple of specials. So Muppet Babies had like totally eclipsed the regular Muppets at that point. So when I was a kid, when I would tell them I liked the Muppets, like, oh, you like the Muppet Babies. And so everyone was like, you like the Muppet Babies? Blah, blah. I'm like, no, I like the Muppets. It's not the same thing. And so that was like, not going to collect freaking Muppet Babies over,
That makes total sense.
It's like, it was like a hard line. And then when I was in my 20s or 30s, whatever it was, I sort of softened on this, obviously.
Yes.
And it's like, I'll just let it go. So now I have like a whole Muppet Babies section, just them. And I'm like, all right, here you go. You can have your own thing. You've been eating at my soul for 30 years. Here you go. Just be done with it. So I just, you have to just give in to your inner demons and say, forget it.
It happens to a lot of people that you make your own collecting rules, and then eventually,
you just throw them out the window.
There are so many people that collect G.I. Joe through like 1988 or 1989, and then eventually you run out of guys to get. So then you're like, all right, I'll get the neon guys from 1991 and 1992.
Right?
It happens to everybody.
So that's why I got this. And that, but I mean, there's a lot of Muppet Baby stuff. But part of my collection too that I really like, with just in collecting in general, like we said this before, is the weirder stuff and the not so readily available stuff. So one thing I'm getting into now, like you see with that maquette there, is like prototypes and that kind of stuff. So what I have here is an unproduced Walter plush from Just Play, and this was July 2013. You can say it says Just Play sample, not for resale.
Wow.
So this was during after The Muppets and before Muppets Most Wanted. Mm-hmm. Just Play released a line of like these plush, like Walgreens and stuff. You could get them, like they were like all over the place. They were like maybe $6 or so. They were like kind of cheap plush toys. They released Kermit, Miss Piggy, Fozzie, and Animal, I want to say.
Okay.
But they did not release Walter at all. For whatever reason. He was like the star of the freaking movie.
Yeah.
They didn't release
But not recognizable to your average person if they didn't see the film.
Yeah, I see. Yes, I kind of.
You know what I mean? Like people that just kind of the pop culture knowledge of the Muppets.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Which is so bizarre because he's the star of those two movies back to back, basically.
Yeah.
And they even make a whole point, like, Floyd in the Muppets Most Wanted says, when Walter quit the Muppets, we just did a whole movie. When Walter joined, we didn't spend a whole lot of time doing this. But yeah, so people today are like, I'm looking for Walter merch. They made a Disney Store plush, a Vinylmation, and he was part of a PVC set.
Okay.
And I believe that's it. Actually, there was one other. They made plush in Japan that wasn't released here in the States, which I have signed by Peter Lentz, who played Walter.
Okay.
So that's like another very rare Walter. But like they didn't make a whole lot of Walter stuff for whatever reason. Like you said, it wasn't recognizable to the general public. And he's kind of a bland.
He's very generic.
Yeah, he's meant to be sort of like a Sesame Street type.
Yes.
Muppet. But so this was an unproduced Walter doll. Pretty interesting. Like why they never made him. But so you won't see that anywhere because that's one of like X amount of samples.
I wonder if like the buyers at Toy Fair were saying like, we'll take this and this and that. We don't want that. Like Hasbro used to have issues. They would try and sneak in like comic book only characters to appease the fans in G.I. Joe. And it would be like, there's an Eskimo character. And like all of us that read the comics want him. But Walmart's like,
who is that?
We don't want this guy in the khaki shorts. We don't want him. And so, like, they would push him down and eventually try and sneak him out somewhere. But it may be one of those situations where the uneducated, Walmart buyers looking at the stuff going, just like you were saying, you got to have Miss Piggy, you got to have Kermit. And they're just like, I don't know what that is. We don't want him in the wave.
Right.
And the toy companies are just at the mercy of the buyer. Like, they want to give the fans everything we want, but they got to have a retailer that wants to take it.
Right. That's the dirty trick of all this, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's it's a business.
Mm-hmm.
It's a toy business, a show business.
It costs money to make the toy, so if they don't have a guaranteed X number of sales, they can't get the factory in China up and running to make it.
Right. And that's just a sad state of affairs. But yeah, so
that's neat though. That you got.
So yeah, I have him, a Kermit sample, and a animal sample from that same line.
Okay.
But those were
the other ones were released.
They were released, but you can see the differences in like the material or like the likeness was this or that, or they added drumsticks to animal, whatever it was.
Yeah,
Still, there's differences. I know they made a Gonzo one. My buddy has, and in the movie he's wearing a red outfit with a feather, and they screwed it up in the production sample, and it's pink. So it's Gonzo wearing this. I mean, it's obvious. It's not even close to being red. Okay, it's like it's like this kind of pink.
Gotcha.
So it's like, that's how you know it's the sample because it's pink instead of red. I got one more.
All right.
A Toy Fair thing that's interesting. Here, catch.
Is this like a popple?
So that.
Can I unzip this?
Yeah. Go ahead. So yeah. It's a Kermit plush that's a ball.
Weird.
And this was given out at Toy Fair one year from a company called Toy Sight. We Know How to Play. This was put out in, I want to say like the 2000s or so. I'm not sure. It doesn't have a date.
Okay.
But this was never made.
Yeah.
This was, a guy had this online on like Facebook Marketplace or something. I was like, what is that? I'm like, I got to have that. And it wasn't crazy expensive. And then I looked it up online. It's like, oh, these are production samples of something that was never made. So they are like, so I got, so I think he had a couple of them. Like, I want them all.
Yeah.
And I want at least two of them because I want one like this and one
in the ball.
And as the ball. So I have him on display as, as both side by side so you can see it without having to mess with it. But yeah, that's like, it's really interesting. And why would they even want to make this in the first place is bizarre or beyond me. I'm like, what? Who was like, you know what? I really want a Kermit ball. But, rather than like, his face just like on it, I want him to like become like popularized and become the ball himself.
It's somebody trying to make the next like pillow pet kind of thing. And we got to get a licensed brand to.
Yeah, and it's like, there's no way you would, looking at that.
You'd never guess this was a Muppet thing or a Kermit thing.
Right, there's no color, there's no other kind of color. I mean, it's the orange and the green, like the blue. I mean, what is going on there?
And it just kind of looks like a hacky sack.
Right.
So bizarre.
So that was just, something when I saw those, like, all right, we got to show, we got to give the fans what they want. You want to see some weird stuff? Let's bring some weird stuff to show.
That's very unusual.
I got one more thing.
All right, we got one more thing.
So my other piece is like, besides prototypes and weird things, I like international merchandise.
Okay.
So here is Harbutts, not hard butts, but Harbutts, plastine Muppets. Whoever heard of Muppets made of plastine? Statler and Waldorf say, ridiculous. So this is Miss Piggy and Fozzie, and you take these kits, and it shows you on the back how to like take out the like kind of like Play-Doh kind of clay molds, and how to create the characters. So this is all, as you can see, still brand.
So you have to sculpt them yourself.
You sculpt them yourself, and they give you the tools, and they give you all this nonsense. And I have the Statler and Waldorf at my house as well. These are released only in England in it looks like 1978.
Yeah, because plasticine is sort of like their word for like modeling clay.
Yeah,
like that's what they call it. I don't know if it's a name brand or if it's a particular type of like modeling clay, but if you ever watch like British crafters that do stuff on YouTube or whatever, they'll always talk about plasticine. That's so weird though. Like I can't even imagine. It was bad enough like the ceramic things they would sell you in the 80s to paint.
Oh yeah.
Like no kid could paint like the package. I can't even imagine a kid being able to follow some directions to sculpt them.
So back in the day, you didn't have all these streaming services. You didn't have all this. You didn't have the tapes to watch. So you put on your record. If you didn't, I'm anxious. I want to play with something. I want to make something. 70s and 80s were big on crafting toys.
Yeah, because you needed stuff that would take time.
Right. So we didn't have these things to waste our days as we do now. So a lot of crafting things. So like there's like a paint your own stained glass, or like you said, like there's figures you could paint. Like they made them for Star Wars and everything else. So yeah, this is one of these things that they had to take some time and make these. I've never seen them
so
made.
Crazy.
If you made them, they couldn't have lasted very long. I mean, clay. I mean, it's hard. It falls apart,
crumble, and yeah.
But yeah, as far as I know, this was never actually made because it still feels pretty heavy.
Wow, that's so bizarre.
So that's the kind of stuff, like just weird, bizarre stuff. And I also like this is a Muppets Most Wanted magazine cover from Israel.
Okay.
So I like to find when something's in another language.
Yeah.
I mean, the Muppet Show was filmed in Britain,
so it was very popular.
So very popular, so that's all English stuff. But there's Japanese stuff. There's like this is like Israeli. So when I find things in other languages, that's really cool to find too. Because like, oh, now it's from
it's obvious it's foreign. Yeah,
right. And they all have their own style and way of doing things. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely a different thing. Like, oh, that's definitely more eye catching, and definitely I can very easily tell that's not from Britain or America. But yeah, so this was, I don't even know what this says, but it's a magazine that exists in Israel, and this is just like them touting
just one issue of
Muppets Most Wanted. Yeah.
Okay.
And I actually have these images were only used in the international marketing of the movie.
Oh, okay.
There's a couple posters. I actually have these as standees.
Oh, really?
That were only released and used in movie theaters in England.
Wow.
So I had them shipped to my house. Like that was, when I found out how much the shipping was going to cost, I'm like, well, it's too late now. Like, I guess it is what it is. These boxes, I mean,
they're big.
They're movie theater standees.
Yeah.
The boxes must have been like this big. And
I'm
like, oh my God. What am I going to do?
Even though they're not that heavy, they charge you because it's a big size.
And it gets heavy because they're cardboard.
Yeah.
I mean, and they have the piece that stands makes it stand up. So it's like a piece of extra cardboard in there. So there were, I think, 3 or 4 of them.
Wow.
There's like, I think it's Kermit Miss Piggy like this, like Constantine and Dominic Bad Guy, which is Ricky Gervais, and a Fozzie and a Gonzo. And I think Animals in that one too. So there was 3 of them. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta have these things. This is crazy. But that's we all do this. Right?
Yes, yeah.
We all see something, we're like, oh, I can't believe I'm about to do this. but I am, because I'm crazy and this has to happen.
That's awesome. I really appreciate you bringing all this stuff. This was great. Like I love seeing things that I'm nostalgic for, obviously, but also like whenever a guest comes, that like I learn a whole bunch of stuff, and it's super fun for me. And so I know for the audience that it's cool to get to see all this different stuff. If you want to see more of Chris's collection, you got to check out his YouTube channel. If you like the idea of seeing Chris hunt, check out Cinema Sickness. You're very frequently in those videos hunting with Dave.
So Dave and I go, So those videos, that's his channel, Cinema Sickness, and I'm like the sidekick on that channel.
Yeah.
So I just kind of make fun of all the stuff we find in all the thrift stores, and so that's where you find the stuff, and then head on over to Muppet Stuff, and we'll tell you a little more about what it is, who made it, a little more of the history behind it, and some things we just kind of whip and shove. Like, all right, this thing, this book. I mean, people know that I find a lot of books.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the people pick through the action figures, but the books don't get picked through that much. And you find, I think I have like almost every Sesame Street book, almost every, it's just stacks and stacks of books. I'm going to have a whole like Muppet library soon of just the books. But yeah, so check out Cinema Sickness for only with me. Don't watch the other videos.
You don't watch the other ones.
If you see me, those are the ones you want to watch. No, I'm just kidding. Of course we watch the other ones. But yeah, that's where we'll find Muppet stuff. And then on my channel, we talk about everything else. And then, of course, make sure you watch Pegwarmers. Yeah. Because maybe we'll be back here and we'll show you more stuff.
Yeah, let us know in the comments down below if you would want to see a Muppets 2 episode. We'll have a different variety of items. Make sure to check out the Patreon bonus video that we're gonna do about the Treasure Island licensor kit. And thanks for hanging on the peg with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. And stay tuned.
Yeah.
They're playing like Felicia versus Bishamon, and if Bishamon ends with a certain move, you just cut Felicia in half.
Did you make sure to see Orchid's thong? Here's 30 more chances as she spins around.
See, you've got the Batgirl shirt on, and you're wearing a Robin t-shirt.
Batgirl and Robin to your Batman.
And Turtles is like Star Wars in the Star Wars is a 70s thing that ran into the 80s. Turtles started in the 80s, but really grew in the 90s.